You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. Brian Kelly came out of hiding. All right, don't go crush me on Twitter. I'm just kidding. But we have not heard from Brian Kelly since he was introduced. And I know there's a lot of differing opinions on this, if he should have done press conferences or not. And I fully understand what he inherited. He talked about it. Not only did Brian Kelly talk about it, Matt House talked about it as well, the roster they inherited and how dire it was. And they added some color to that today as they spoke with the media. But Brian Kelly could have scheduled 30 minutes or 15 minutes to go meet with reporters after signing day, like to talk about a signing class. Like you can find 15 minutes, Kat. Anyway, but today, so the next 2 days, we're going to meet the whole staff. So the way they handled it is Wednesday, Matt House, Brian Polian were at the podium, and then they had breakout sessions with the individual position coaches. Tomorrow, it's offense. So we'll get to meet Mike Denbrock, the OC, and then all the offensive coaches will be available for one-on-one interviews. So that's tomorrow. Here's what Brian Kelly said on the decision to bring in Matt House.
What really drew me to Matt was coordinator experience. You know, here's a man who has multiple coordinator roles at three different schools in particular, but more importantly in the SEC. You know, and having experience in the SEC as a coordinator was certainly something that I was looking for. You know, Matt's coached all the positions as well. And as a former defensive coach myself and a Division II head coach, I can appreciate somebody that's had to coach all those positions because I've had to have that on my agenda as well. So he's coached the positions. He can fix the defense if it needs to get fixed, which it's never going to need to get fixed, right, Matt? We know that already. And he's won at the highest level. He's won a Super Bowl. So he's a winning football coach and a great teacher, great communicator.
If there was one thing, maybe two things mostly, that stood out listening to Brian Kelly today as he ran through everybody. The common thread was winning. It was meaning hired a bunch of coaches that have been at winning programs, where the expectation is Matt House, Super Bowl in Kansas City, Jamar Cain, college football playoff at Oklahoma. If it were Kerry Cooks or Brian Polian, playoff expectations at Notre Dame with Brian Kelly. Everybody that he talked about today all had that in their background. Even Robert Steeples. Robert Steeples was played in the NFL and is a relative newbie. He was a high school head football coach before he got a job on staff with the Minnesota Vikings. And Steeples built a state championship program. Basically, that's what Brian Kelly underscored, was winning. And Matt House is no exception. He's been a DC in the SEC, and he's also won. That was one part. The other is what Brian Kelly alluded to there. It was SEC experience. SEC experience or ties to Louisiana. Filling in the blind spots that he has, not being from here or having coached in the South. And I thought that was very self-aware. Now, as for Matt House, he's interesting because he's a guy that was with the Kansas City Chiefs. He had great job security. Steve Spagnuolo is the defensive coordinator there. Matt House was the linebackers coach. He had a great linebacker room in Kansas City. They've hosted the AFC Championship game the last half decade. They've been to 2 Super Bowls. They won one of them. So there was a lot of comfort and security there and winning at the highest level. But Matt House explained why he wanted to get back to college.
First of all, when you leave coordinating, you always have that hunger to get back and do it. I enjoy the part of the game, the scheme part, the building of a team, the building of a staff. I enjoy when you lock arms and get in the room together and you can put together a plan. And I enjoy the development piece. It was fun, the 3 years in Kansas City, to go back and work with Spags and to learn from Coach Reed, and obviously winning at a high level. But at the end of the day, there was a hunger to come back and to be a defensive coordinator. And I missed the part of the relationships with the players. I had a great linebacker room in Kansas City, great guys, okay? But one of the things that I did miss, I have 4 kids of my own, and I missed the opportunity for my kids to get to know the people that I was spending time with outside. And coming back to college affords you to do that.
That was I thought that was a very real, very personable answer. I love that from him on why he wanted to come back to college. And it's true. In the NFL, you're dealing with a lot of adults who have their own families, and they're there to work and do a job and leave. Whereas in college, a lot of those young student athletes, they live on campus, they're around the facility a lot, and coaches a lot of times do bring families around. It's more familial. There is that component. And I thought that was a very raw and real answer why he might prefer the college game to the NFL. But also, as he mentioned, the opportunity to coordinate. Again, paycheck doesn't suck either. But the other thing about Matt House that stood out to me, it's the first time I've ever heard Matt House speak. Matt House, I'll give you this example, and this is probably going to be lost on 95% of you because it's random that I remember it. But I remember watching God, this is so random. Before my career in sports, I was in news radio. I did news. And I remember from the 2004 presidential election, they had the vice presidential debate. And it was Dick Cheney and John Edwards, I believe, was the VP candidate. And watching that vice presidential debate was almost hilarious because in most political debates, candidates eat up all of their allotted time and then go over. They have to be shut up. And Dick Cheney was just pithy. He would speak for 10 or 12 seconds, make his point, and then be done. That was Matt House today. Like, he didn't have a lot of expansive answers, and I'm okay with that. Like, I'm very good with a guy being succinct with his words, making his point, and moving on. And he did that. Like, play number 6, Muse, if you would. He was asked, like, are you learning from Steve Spagnuolo? Are there things you'll bring from Kansas City to LSU? This is what he said.
Coach Spags, the thing that he does is he does a great job of teaching in concepts. So it can appear to the quarterback that you're complicated while keeping it simple enough for guys to play fast on defense. And that's kind of what we'll do.
That's it. All he needed was 15 seconds. What are you going to take from Spagnuolo? Make it complicated on the quarterback. That's what we're going to do. It was, you can tell defensively, he's the smartest guy in the room. Now, what about how all that translates to players and comes along? We'll see. This was an LSU defense last year that was downright bad for half the season. They were awful in 2020 under Bo Pelini. They were bad for half of this season. It's pretty clear what happened. At one point in the season, Ed Orgeron finally allowed Durante Jones to blitz. And whenever they started stunting, the defense improved immediately. And by the end of the season, they were pretty good. Now, the bowl game notwithstanding, they were playing with 38 players. But by the end of the season, they were playing good football. They beat Texas A&M. I mean, they were better. So I think there are pieces there to work with. The other thing that was interesting was about autonomy with the defense. Because one thing we don't know about Brian Kelly, and we've talked about this a lot with head coaches here, how much do head coaches dabble on, in their respective side of the ball? I just mentioned about Ed Orgeron not giving Durante Jones full autonomy to run a defense he wanted because Ed dabbled. Ed, unfortunately, did that with offense at times. We know Les Miles did that with the offense as well. So Brian Polian was asked, Matt House was asked about Brian Kelly and then how much autonomy Matt House will have running this defense.
The thing I've learned in a short amount of time with Coach, whether it was through the process of conversations that ended up to me coming here or through the conversations we've had now, is he's going to empower people to do their job, whether it's a player, whether it's a coach, whether it's a nutritionist, okay? And the thing we're doing right now is more than putting the plan together. Right now we're trying to get our guys to buy in to the habits and the focus to do the things right day in and day out. So when we do get on the grass and execute the plan, we can be consistent in our execution. All right, we can be a gritty defense that has the traits to strain play in and play out.
Coach empowers the people he hires to do their job. I think that's a sign of a great leader. And it's one thing to say it in a press conference, but a lot of times, actions speak louder than words. You have circumstantial evidence that suggests that's true. Look at the list of defensive coordinators Brian Kelly brought through Notre Dame and what they went on to do. Bob Diaco, he brought in, who became a head coach at UConn. Brian Van Gorder was the outlier, but Mike Elko obviously was at Notre Dame, had great success, went to Texas A&M, did great there. Now he's the head coach at Duke. Marcus Freeman is now the head coach at Notre Dame. It's so evident based on the quality of hires that Brian Kelly has made at the defensive coordinator spot, which makes it appealing for guys who are ambitious coaches that want to continue to grow and develop to want to work for him. So, I mean, if you weren't that guy, you gain that reputation, that gets out, it's harder to hire. I think that's pretty evident there based on what Matt House had to say. There's a lot that Matt House said. He was also asked about the base defense, because a lot of people ask you to be 3-4, 4-3. And this was pretty candid because he said, quite honestly, as of this point, you don't even really know.
That's a great question, but we're still learning our guys. And until you can learn your guys, football 101 is, right, accentuate the positive and try to keep them out of negative situations. As coaches and as a coaching staff, we got the experience and the versatility to put them in good situations. But there's a process of learning what your guys can do and what they can't do before you can execute that. And that's the process of going through this winter, going through spring ball. It's a process, and we'll kind of metamorphose into what we can become.
If I can illustrate that just a step further, the best example I can give is Apu Ika. You and I watched Apu Ika wreck stuff for Baylor in the Big 12 championship game, in the Sugar Bowl, and you're going, why did that guy leave LSU? Well, because you had a coach that had become pot committed to running a 4-3, and you didn't have a role really for that guy. So this 350-pound space eater demolition man in the middle of a defense wrecking an offensive line and pressuring the quarterback, you basically said, we don't have space for you because we want to do something different. Well, that's stupid. And Matt House basically just told you, we don't know what we're going to run yet because we have to see what our guys can do. When we figure out what our guys can do best, that's what we're going to run. And look, over time, they'll recruit to what they want to do, but there's no sense in jamming a round peg in a square hole right now. Win with what you have. And it looks like they're going to do that. Encouraging day. I really enjoyed hearing from Matt House, and we'll hear more from the other assistants, no doubt, as well on the defensive side of the ball. But a really good start, it seems, for this new staff. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.